Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. So continuing from last time, I think we are on shloka number. We are still on shloka number 6. I'm just continuing to read that. So I'll share my screen if you may read.
Yeah.
I'll make it larger a little for you. Okay. So we are on this paragraph, purpose of introducing the warriors.
The purpose of
Oops, sorry. Yeah.
the purpose of introducing the warriors. Before continuing with these descriptive verses, it is important to understand their purpose. They provide the context necessary for us to come to know Arjuna's condition. The story that is unfolding is not an illustrative story. Illustrative stories are useful tools for communication, no doubt, but here the story is to tell us how the teaching came about. The information is also given in the Upanishads, where we are told that a given person went to another person in order to be taught, and that person has gone to yet another person, and so on. Thus, a story is told. For example, in the sixth chapter of Chan- Chandognopanishad, there is a story about a great teacher, Uddhalaka, and his son called Shvetaketu. When this boy was 12 years of age, Uddalaka decided to send him to a Gurukula because he did not think his son could learn any more at home. Shvetaketu spent 12 years in the Gurukula, came home when he was 24. All this is mentioned in the Upanishad. The young man returned home very proud, and seeing this, his father asked, "Did you ask your teacher for that knowledge gaining which everything is as well known?" The son replied, "I don't think my teacher had such a knowledge. Otherwise, he would have taught it to me." Shvetaketu later asked his father if there was such a knowledge. His father proved to him that there was. By the knowledge of the cause, Karana, everything else is as well known. If you know the clay, you know the pot. The word pot is only with a reference to a name and form, Nama and Rupa, for the substance clay. There is no substance in the pot other than clay for you to know. Similarly, once you know the cause of this entire creation, if there is such a cause, then everything is as well known. It is not that everything is known, but that everything is as well known. Just as you know the substance, clay, in terms of reality, you also know that Satya is what Nitya is. You know the real name and the unreal. This is all there is to know. Uddalaka established the possibility of such a knowledge, and in time, Shvetaketu wanted to know that is how we get Mahakavya Upadesha, the teaching of the thou art, Tatvamasi. This kind of story then reveals the context and tells us about the urge to know, how it has to be known, and so on. In other words, the whole teaching methodology, sampradaya, is brought out through these stories.
Okay, so this is very nice. Any questions on this piece? I have a couple of comments, but let's see if they're all clear. Okay.
Actually, I
So,
have one question, G.
yes.
Sorry. So the idea here is that Tattvamasi refers to, because the pot example is given, pot and clay example is given before that.
Mhm.
Does it mean that we are made of the same essential material as the divine, or what is the meaning?
Ha, good question. So this is the fulcrum of Vedanta, Mahavakya. Mahavakya Vichara means, whenever we talk about Vedanta, this is what Vedanta is. Everything else that Vedanta is attributed to me, those are supporting limbs of this main focal point, which is the Tattvamasi Mahavakya. And there are multiple Mahavakyas. Tattvamasi is one of them that we've seen. So I'll just come to this bit in a sort of a roundabout way, but I'll just lay out a little bit of the context also, like about why this, I guess, background and context is very important before one starts the study of any subject matter. So it's very interesting because what we encounter over here is that anytime you have a shishya or some adhikari who is approaching a guru, it may be some mentor, it may be some figure to whom one approaches for some knowledge or a trade skill or whatever it may be. Today, if you want to learn chess, also you have to learn under some chess teacher. It's not just Mahavakya, but you need to go to a teacher for many things in life. So there's so many things that are really covered over here. So one is that Arjuna is not alone in his conundrum, in his questions, in his quandaries about life, and I guess he's torn between what's right and what's wrong, and that sense of being torn apart is heightened by the whole din and cry of the battlefield that he finds himself in, because that's kind of like a do or die situation. It's not a single, I guess today when we talk about like paralysis and analysis paralysis, where you get so paralyzed by the number of choices that you have. But in Arjuna's mind, it's not like going shopping for a phone. Should I buy an Apple or should I buy a Samsung? It's like, do I kill my relatives or not? Like that's a huge deal, right? It's not some menial choice that he has to make. And we see that in the Upanishads also. It's always beautifully laid out that there is a certain context to the teaching. Like if you see Kathopanishad, then you have this Nachiketa story and then the story of his father. You look at this Chandogya Upanishad, then you have Shvetaketu and you have Uddalaka's story. So here, Pujya Samji is oftentimes commented upon Shvetaketu, like he's committing several errors in his approach. First is that he's a young lad who's gone off to it's kind of like, oh, so the boy has gone to college and now he's become very smart and very wise and everybody else is underneath or beneath him rather, right? So that's one of the things that he feels that, array, now I'm well educated, I'm a smart, capable young man who's here to change the world, that kind of thing. You feel that sense of, I guess, invincibility when you've gained a little bit of education. And this is very similar to the Dunning-Kruger effect, if you're familiar with that, right? Which is that if you know a little bit about something, you somehow start feeling that I know a lot. But then the more you know about the subject, then this whole thing starts becoming clear that what I knew precious little. What I knew was just a sliver of the entire knowledge base. And then as you start knowing more and as you actually start becoming somewhat of a competent expert, then your only way to communicate it to somebody else is that, okay, yes, here's an answer, but it's complicated. And it's complicated is a very important thing to really suffix, whenever one is making a statement about something that's not so straightforward. Like, I'll give you a simple example. If somebody comes to Vedanta, brand new completely, and then they come across this whole thing, that Tamasi Mahavakya, right? That you are Brahmani, I am consciousness. Very clear, very easy. But then, with steady exposure, you start seeing that, okay, you know what? There are all of these seeming, and I use the word seeming because there are no contradictions in the teaching. The teaching is contradiction free, but the contradictions are in our mind. And so there are these seeming contradictions that get in the way. So the first thing is that Shvetaketu underestimates his father, because if his father is asking that, did you get that knowledge, knowing which everything else is known? Clearly, I should take pause and think about the fact that, wait, my dad's asking me a very particular question. He probably knows something that I don't. So that's one problem. Second, he underestimates his teacher. That, oh, my teacher probably doesn't know it, otherwise he would have taught me. Third, he overestimates himself, which is that if my teacher knew also that I deserve to be taught because I am qualified. So in all instances, he kind of shows that he's not really that great of an adhikari, right? In these instances, and he gets that he gets a little bit of humble pie from his father. He sobers down, he comes back to earth, and if you think about it, his father has to teach him Tattvamasi Mahavakya in 6 different ways. So this Tattvamasi is repeated, I think, 6 times, or 6 times or 9 times, I forget. But it's repeated X number of times in the Chandogya Upanishad using different examples. Pot clay is one example, gold and jewelry is another example. There are different examples used over here. So now, coming to this Tattvamasi Mahavakya, in this, it's composed of three shabda. Okay, Tat, Tvam, Asi. Tat, we all as Astikas accept, understand as Ishvara. Tat is Ishvara. Tat Padatha. The second Padatha is the Tvam Padatha. Tvam Padatha refers to the Jiva, the individual. I have the closest experience as a Jiva because I am a Jiva, as this Upadhi level I'm talking about. Not as the Atma, but as the Upadhi. I know what the Jiva is because I face this Jivatvam 24/7. Somebody gets mad at me, I get mad at them, I feel insecure, I feel happy, I feel this, I feel that. Okay, my Jivatvam is very evident to me. So not a lot has to be explained about my Jivatvam because it is my daily experience. Nonetheless, we are not very clear about what constitutes the Jiva, like how exactly to define a Jiva. So in Vedanta, what you see is the Mahavakyas, this whole Vichara is sometimes a top-down approach, sometimes it's a bottom-up approach. And that is only to decondition us from taking one approach too seriously and saying that this is the only way in which you can understand the Mahavakya. That is why there are so many different examples used. Now, when I make that statement, there should not be ambiguity about it, because the ambiguity could be that, oh, maybe there are multiple ways to interpret the Mahavakya. No, there's only one way to understand this equation of Tattvamasi. There are not multiple ways to understand it. What what you arrive at through those different examples, that cannot be subject to one's preference or one's personality or one's understanding or interpretation or whatever. That has to be clear, which means the vision of the guru, as the guru sees himself, herself, as the self, as the Atma, must be a shared and aligned vision by the student. There is only one vision. The vision cannot be altered or subject to reinterpretation or whatever of that sort. Okay, so that is out of the question. But the examples that point towards that padartha, not padartha, but that relationship between Jivatma and Paramatma, there are different ways to arrive at the thing that one has to arrive at. But one has to arrive at that understanding, and there cannot be any gadbad or difference. No. So now what happens is sometimes the guru will start with the Tvam Padartha. You'll talk about the Sukshma Sharira, Sthula, Sukshma, Karana Sharira. You'll talk about the Panchakoshas. You'll talk about the, I guess, Karmendriyas, Jnanendriyas. You'll talk about different functions of the Antakarana. Um all of these things, you'll talk about the Jiva Prapancha. You'll talk about Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, and all of these things that we encounter from our individualized experience. The Jiva is dissected. And then the Jiva is made to see that what I took to be myself is not really who I am. Through other prakriyas such as Drik Drishya Viveka, for instance. What does Drik Drishya Viveka do? It takes different slices of the Jiva. In some sense, I'm saying this, that, from one standpoint, you say that, okay, I am the body and all the other objects are objects and I am the body, right? Because the eyes see, the tree is seen. But then the sight is seen by the mind. And so what the eye sees is now the object, and the mind becomes the subject, and then you kind of like take a step back, right? Then which is the Sakshi is ultimately the subject, and then everything else is an object. So now what you've done is you've dissected the Jiva and made the Jiva sort of, you've taken away aspects of the Jiva and turned it into the non-self, the Anatma, through this Jiva analysis, this Tvam Padartha Vichara, right? Now you have, and I'm just giving a very quick overview. It's not meant to be comprehensive. You have a whole text called Digdirsha Vivek, which is pretty it's not introductory. It sounds very introductory, but it's a difficult and not so easily accessible text. One day we'll get through it. Pujya Samji has given a brilliant commentary on it. Um, the next would be like the Tat Padatha Vichara. Now, over here, it is not so evident to everybody what this Tat Padatha is, but we refer to it as Ishvara, as the whole. So, one is the Vyashti, which is the individual, the other is the Samashti, which is the total, the whole. Now, we as students of Shastra, there is a certain background we come with as well, right? So if you see that in the Bhagavad Gita also, there are many occasions where Krishna Bhagwan presumes a certain background that Arjuna has, because why wouldn't he? Of course he would. He's grown up in a sattvic, not sattvic, but a Vedic family, in a dharmic household. He has been taught by gurus. He's been exposed to the shastras. He's probably memorized a lot of mantras. This Vedic teaching exposure, Jyotisha, etc., etc., all of that is very likely to be, part of Arjuna's training and his education. So, words such as, today, just imagine like there's a completely Western audience, or why West? It could be somebody from other parts of the world also. We don't want to make it universal, and they don't know what the word karma means. So you have to explain what karma is. They don't know what moksha is. You have to explain what moksha is. Krishna Bhagwan liberally uses these words in his teaching without getting too much into the details, because of course Arjuna has heard about them. But what's not clear to Arjuna is how all of these things fit together and form that grand vision. And that is why Krishna Bhagwan actually has to use what ideas Arjuna already has, but based on his cultural background and conceptual moorings, Krishna Bhagwan has to build this Atma Vichara tower, and unfold the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. So that's how it has to be done. There's a certain prakriya, and there are multiple prakriyas to get that grand unified vision of the self. So that is the tattvam. That's where the asi part comes in, which is that, okay, the tvam padatha, we've already dissected that it is not you, it is not you, it is not you, you've done this, you've done that, you've done Digdishu Viveka. But then the question is ki, "Arey, theek hai, but then who am I?" But then the Guru's like, Beta, hold on. We still have to do Tat Padatha Vichara. So now you talk about Ishvara, and you talk about the whole, and Virat and Hiranyagarbha and Antaryami, and then you sort of do a dissection of the total, which is to say that even these, the totality is also ultimately an object. It is object. Ishvara is not the grand manifested Jagat or the cosmos for that matter, but Ishvara is the very truth of the cosmos also. The truth of Ishvara is the truth of the cosmos, and this is also a manifestation just as a Vyakti. In fact, the word Vyakti is a very beautiful word. This is why Sanskrit Bhasha is so um, uh, useful when it comes to understanding Vedanta, because Vyakti means to be manifest, Vyakta Hona. And so the individual, automatically it comes to your mind that, wait, I am not who I think I am. This Vyakti is only a manifestation. Isn't that beautiful? So then even the word leads to the question that, okay, if this is just a manifestation, then who actually am I? And then that's brilliant. And so in the same way, the whole Jagat is also manifest. And so then the Jagat is also not the truth of Ishvara, and the truth of Ishvara is the self. The truth of the Jiva is also the self. And this Asi establishes the oneness, the wholeness, the unifying factor between Tat Padatha and Tvam Padatha. Because what you do is you take away the incongruencies between Tat and Tvam. You can't say that the individual is the same as the total, because of course they are different in quality and in quantity. It's different, the magnitude and the I guess it just doesn't tally up. You can't say that the wave is equal to the ocean. You can't say that. But then you have to say that, okay, there's a certain upadhi which is a limiting adjunct. It's not an intrinsic nature. It is not intrinsic to the being. It is only an adjunct to the being, and that is what you call an upadhi, which is, it is not fundamental to the being. And therefore, because it is an upadhi, you can take it away without impacting the being. The being remains unimpacted when the upadhi is stripped away. Now, that stripping away is a matter of understanding, not so much that you actually physically strip it away. So if I strip away the waveness from the wave, and if I strip away the oceanness from the ocean, what remains is the same thing, which is water. But I have to take away, as though take away in one's understanding, you have to take away the upadhis. And then you see that what remains is nothing but the self. But what happens in a lot of these neo Vedanta circles and all, ki, oh, just asking who am I sufficient, and somehow you'll arrive at it. And maybe if you do a lot of vichara and all, you might arrive at the individual sakshi level, the chidabhasa. You might arrive at that. You can never, I put this down in writing, you can never arrive at the self just by asking one's own ignorant self, who am I? The most you can arrive at is the fact that okay, maybe I am a witness to my mind and other things, but that also is a limited understanding. It is not the total. It's not the Mahavakya. The Mahavakya is not going to leave you stranded with just a who am I inquiry. The Mahavakya is going to take you all the way to yourself as the whole. It is going to establish the Sarvatma Bhava. If the Sarvatma Bhava is not established through the Mahavakya, it is going to be an abortive effort because it is not going to culminate in self knowledge. It will be left, you will be left hanging somewhere in between in a very quiet and meditative and well prepared mind, yes, qualified mind, yes, but a knowledgeable mind, no. Knowledge has to come in the form of a clear understanding, a clear vision of this Mahavakya. That's what the Mahavakya is representing. And I sort of address that in a roundabout way, but is it painting a better picture of what this Tattvamasi is?
Yes, G. Yes.
Wonderful. So let me see. Is there something else to comment? Um, okay. Yes. Yes. So the sampradaya is as I think we mentioned it in one of the several I think satsangs in the past. The sampradaya is not just the teaching, but it is the methodology which is part and parcel of the teaching. In fact, you cannot separate the methodology from the teaching because they are the same any more than you can separate the heat from the fire or the light from the fire. They go together because if there's a certain methodology, the methodology is like it's kind of like the payload that's dropped, and that payload is or rather the methodology is the carrier and the payload is the knowledge, the vision that comes out of it. If the methodology is flawed, it's never going to be able to result in that vision. And so the methodology and the vision is the outcome of the methodology. A flaw in the methodology is going to be an improper vision, and an improper vision is the same as avidya, because vidya has to be clear. And I had this question for, let me, I guess, do an open mic sort of discussion here, right? If I ask any of you all, what is knowledge? What is the best way you can respond to that question? What is knowledge? What is jnana? See, we've been using this word our whole life, knowledge. And yet it's like if I ask you to define what is knowledge, it's not easy. What do you think?
At a very fundamental level, I feel like, and this is just my experience. Knowledge is something that frees some some kind of so the feeling that we have when we have doubts and anxiety and stuff like that, and knowledge somehow seems to be the one that comes in and kind of relieves you of that burden. um, but it's purely an experience so I don't know how whether it qualifies as a definition of knowledge.
So let me do a paksha of that.
Okay.
So suppose I think when we went to school, we all study this, I guess, Dalton's atomic model, right?
Mhm.
The pie and raisins model, whatever it was. And then I think as we got a little older, then there was a solar system model. Proton equals like sun, and electrons are like the planets orbiting this proton neutron
Mhm.
nucleus of the atom. And then, did you ever feel like when you studied, like, a little bit of quantum physics, that, okay, it's an electron cloud, it's a probability distribution, it's not like small little lumps of matter going around the nucleus, but it's like a cloud distribution. Did that somehow, like, free your thinking a little bit? That, oh, wow, like, this is amazing. You just feel like, oh, wow, this is just a different way of looking at it. Or anything of that sort.
Yeah, as I think the freedom was very band limited by age.
Hmm.
So at different points in time, different doubts and questions that you have. Well, the questions change and the answers change as well.
That's it. So now suppose the answers change. That means that even this cloud distribution model thingy is also model. That means that it is not the truth. It is not final, but it's just tentative. And it's tentative because there's probably something better out there that we haven't yet discovered. And then that's going to be, the next thing that we'll be like, oh wow, yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Or like string theory. I know everything's made of strings. It's like, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And none of these can be called per se jnana. I'm going to say something like very
Hmm.
odd, contradictory-ish, not exactly contradictory, but seemingly contradictory, and then we'll reconcile it.
Hmm.
Suppose I say that, suppose a child asks, what is this? And then you say it's a calculator. And then, what does it do? It calculates. You have mathematical operations that you can perform on this calculator. And then they'd be like, oh wow, that's amazing. That's so cool, right? And then that's knowledge that this is a calculator. But then it is a tentative answer. Because I call this a calculator because it's organized in a certain way that it it appears as a calculator. It is a calculator for all intents and purposes. But then, if I analyze it from a different perspective, then it's just made of metal and plastic and different things. So it's like, what exactly is a calculator? Is it the configuration? Yes, you're probably calling that configuration is a nama rupa. So now that this is a calculator is a form of knowledge. But then again, like it's knowledge. That is, it is a title that we've given to a certain configuration of objects which have been put together. I'll make this a little bit more abstract. Let me make this more abstract because I think we'll have a little bit of fun with this. Let me stop sharing the screen. We could spend the rest of the session just getting deep into this part. Suppose you have a pot. Now, everybody has a sense of what a pot looks like. You've all seen a pot. I've seen a pot. And so when you see a pot, you recognize a pot. But I keep tinkering with the shape of the pot a little bit. It's still a pot. And then I tinker with it a little bit more. And I keep modifying the shape. At some point, you have to say that, you know what, this doesn't look like a pot anymore, right? But your threshold of saying when this stops looking like a pot may differ from my threshold when I say that this stops looking like a pot, because I may still have a pot level continuity that I'm giving that Namarupa. Now, where is the knowledge? Who is right? Are you right or am I right? At what point do you stop calling a pot depending on how much you change it? That means we call something a pot only based on a very broad, agreed upon,
Yeah.
socially accepted definition or experience based definition or something of that sort, right?
Almost arbitrary.
It's
Yeah.
arbitrary.
Yeah.
When I was thinking of writing this book, I wanted to write a whole topic on this thing only, which is whatever we refer to as being true is only an arbitrary construct, something that we have superimposed based on our functional ease and just for us to survive and live in this world, for us to function sensibly in this world.
It seems like this type of arbitrary agreement, while not sufficient for understanding the tattva and so on, seems like it is almost evolutionary to deal with a limited complexity and limitedness of our brains. Is that right?
100%, 100, absolutely. Because see, today you have to call things something. If you have to transact, you have to give a name to that transaction. Today I was, I'm just sort of deviating, but I was having a discussion with my dad about Bitcoin, and we were talking about like, stores of wealth. So like I was talking about like, what a big miss it was not investing in Bitcoin at the right time, right? And I was like, I didn't invest in Bitcoin because I just don't understand it. I don't understand it because it's very arbitrary in terms of like how you assign value to something, but it's agreed upon. There's a social agreed upon. And then we were discussing Bitcoin versus gold. And then he's like, yeah, the reason Bitcoin seems so arbitrary is because there's nobody backing it. Today if you have the dollar, the US dollar is backed by the US government. And that's why you have this thing bill behind, right? Which is, I promise to pay the bearer the sum of $1 or the sum of $100 or whatever it is. It's a promise by the US government that this $1 bill is actually worth $1. It has buying power, so it's backed by the government. But then I was like, but gold is not backed. Gold is not backed by anything. If you think about it, like it is socially accepted store of value based on historical standards that we followed, and that's fine, because somewhere you need to move away from the barter system. I can't say that here's a bushel of rice or bushel of wheat for your services. I can't do that. No. You need a common store, agreed upon store of value that you can transact with, to move away from the barter system and to the monetary system. And that's what gave rise to, like, broader and larger economies and sophisticated economies. The whole financial system is because we agree upon a store of value, whether it's Bitcoin or whether it's gold. Gold, I mean, you can't eat gold, you can't drink gold. If there's a famine, you can't do anything with gold. It's just there as a store of value, nothing more than that. In fact, there are more metals like copper which are more useful than gold. In your semiconductors and your wires and all, you can use copper to a greater extent. Just because something is rare doesn't make it intrinsically valuable, but we agree upon it. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, all of our transactions in the world are really agreed upon arbitrary standards, including saying hi and bye to people, right? Or waving your hand. I could wave my hand this way. I don't have to do it this way, but this is agreed upon. It's easier to do this. You can just leave your hand very, like, flaccid, and just, like, it's less effort. But this is agreed upon. But when you're like looking at a flag, this is agreed upon, right? National anthem, you stand, it's agreed upon, and that's why you do it. It's all symbols. But and therefore, when we refer to something as knowledge, that this is even a pen, it's agreed upon, therefore we call it a pen. At what point does this pen stop being a pen? I can keep altering it to some point when it's no longer a pen, and then you'll call it something else. So this therefore, no, when you say something is knowledge, and if knowledge is only tentative and it is not definitive, then is it truly knowledge? Another example, I like using this one: rainbow colors. If you see, they bleed into each other. No, it's a spectrum. There's no clear demarcation between yellow and orange, or between, like, blue and green. There's no demarcation. Where you say that blue stops being blue, and where I say that blue stops being blue, may not be at the same point. Because again, it's like, how broadly do you define blue? Ancient people did not have a separate word for blue in some parts of the world, because they treated blue and green as one color and just shades of the same color. Very, very, and I can see how that can be the case. Um, okay, so what am I getting at? What is knowledge? If knowledge is not true, then what is knowledge? None of what we said is true. So whatever. Okay, so now here's a real kicker. My Well, I think this is the Vedantic claim. It doesn't claim it explicitly, but I think this is what the Shastras say implicitly. Everything that you call knowledge. Remember, there are two types of vidyas. You have uh, in the Mundaka Upanishad, it talks about Paravidya and Aparavidya. Aparavidya means knowledge of everything in the Jagat. Paravidya is knowledge of the self, Atma Vidya, Brahma Vidya. That's Paravidya. I assert, and I think the Shastra is clear if one correctly interprets it, that there is actually no truth to any other substance in the world that you refer to as apara. No knowledge of apara vidya is truly vidya. It is all only tentative. That's it. It's only tentative. It's only functional. It's only for you to get by in life. It's only for your survival. It's only for your transaction. That's it. The only knowledge, and I won't say the most important knowledge, the most exalted knowledge, the highest knowledge. No, 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 no. The only knowledge that exists, that you cannot negate, that you cannot challenge, is self-knowledge, paravidya. And that is the only knowledge. That is the only knowledge.
And it doesn't change over time and place and things like that.
Nothing. It doesn't change based on how you interpret it. It doesn't change based on how society agrees upon it. It is not a commonly agreed upon definition. It is the truth. And that truth is unchanging, and therefore it is the only truth because it is not, because it is. Now here's the next. Now with all of this context, what is knowledge? Is it getting any clearer? What is knowledge?
Okay, you
It
said that.
gives a clear picture. It gives a clear picture of any particular thing. So, even Tattvamasi also, uh, it's the same related one. So when we say knowledge, it means that it gives a clear picture of anything.
So
Getting it?
knowledge gives a clear picture of, okay, that's very close, very close. The way Shastra discusses, with the way Pujya explained it, is very close to what you said. But the words he uses is knowledge is that which is true to the thing. It is true to the thing. Now, let's take that to its fullest extent. That statement. This is a pen is only functional. Yes, it is true in some sense. It is a pen. I would have to be like demented to say it is not a pen. But I also have that clarity that I only call this a pen because of a certain configuration, and at some point it can stop being a pen. If I break it into two parts, is it still a pen? Then what do you call it? What do you call it? You'll say, okay, it's a broken pen. It's two parts of a pen. How many parts do I need to break this into for one to no longer be able to call it a part of a pen, to make it identifiable as part of a pen? It's arbitrary. So anyway, here's the real kicker. Okay, this is stupendous, amazing. Knowledge. If we are saying that knowledge is that which is true to the object, we are referring to knowledge as something independent of the object, which it is not. Knowledge is the object. Knowledge is the object. Now, but here's the best part. We said that every object that we talk about is only tentative. It's only a tentative nama rupa, and therefore it's only tentative knowledge, because the nama rupa being tentative is the same thing as the knowledge of it being tentative. But that which is not tentative is the self. Knowledge is the self. That's the mic drop moment. I actually have a mic. I want to drop it, but that's the moment. Knowledge is the self, and that's why there's a word that is used for it. Jnanam. Satyam Jnanam Anantam. See? It's there in the Upanishads. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Satchit Ananda. The Chit is Jnanam. The Chit, the knowledge, is the self. I'll repeat that. This Jnana that we refer to is the truth of something, right? True to the object is the truth of something. It is that which is the truth of something. What is it? Sat. What we talked about, Sat. Sat is the content of the substance, of the thing. What is the Sat of the ocean? Water. What is the Sat of the wave? Water. What is the Sat of the pot? Clay. What is the Sat of the jewelry? Gold. What is the Sat of this Jagat? Brahman. What is the Sat of the Jiva? Brahman. What is the Sat of Ishvara? Brahman. Satyam, right? It is that which is the truth of it. It has no Nama Rupa. It is Nama Rupa Rahita. Jagat, Mithya is Nama Rupa Sahita. Sahita means with. Rahita means without. Thoda thoda I'm picking up the language. That which is without the name and form, which sustains all the name and forms. When I say that which is without the name and form, does not mean I'm dismissing the Jagat. I'm saying the Jagat is sustained. The name and the form is sustained by the nameless and formless. Wave has a certain attribute. You call it waveness. Small wave, big wave, very big wave, tsunami. Now you call it a tsunami. At some point, the wave stops being a wave, and then you call it a tsunami. Until then, it's like a big surfer's wave. But the surfer will stay away from the tsunami. He can't ride that. It's very dangerous. It'll kill him. So the wave has different forms: big wave, small wave, tiny wave, no wave also. But the water is water. As an example, now let's not say that, oh, but water is also H2O. Then we are breaking the flow of the narrative. We are actually moving away from the Udaharana. So you have the Drishtanta and the Dashtanta. The Dashtanta is what is established. Many times I've seen, like when we study Vedanta, there are like always people who will nitpick the examples. And that's why Shastra says, okay, if this example is, here's another one, here's another one, here are like 5, 10 examples for you. If all of these examples you're going to find a flaw in, then you're missing the forest for the trees, right? Because you have to see what is the vision that is being established. Because ultimately you have to drop the example. It's a leap. It's an intellectual, visionary leap from the example into the substance of the example. And one has to go to that. That substance is the self, because that is what is established. The vision of the self is the knowledge of the self, is the self. What is the vision of the self if not it the self? The vision of the self is the self. Can I have a vision of the self as something other than the self? I can't. Because if I have the vision of the self as myself, as somebody who is objectifying the self, the way I'm able to objectify this pen, then I have to be different from the self. If I am different from the self, and if I have objectified the self, then I cannot be the self because I have just objectified it as the self. Then there has to be a second self that is objectifying the first self, and a third self which is objectifying the second self, and that becomes an infinite regression, ad infinitum, right? And that's a logical fallacy. I forget, there's a Sanskrit word for it also, but you call it, a regression error, essentially. So what happens here is, if the vision of the self is the self, and that is the knowledge of the knowledge of the self is the same as the self. And that knowledge is a vision, and it flashes immediately as oneself in one's mind, not as something other than the self. And therefore, I cannot objectify it. Now, if you see the words and the way I'm expressing all of this, it seems almost paradoxical if one doesn't really have that anchoring, to this teaching and to the sampradaya. And that is the beauty of Vedanta, that it is so clear. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, it's going to be paradoxical. But there are no paradoxes in Vedanta. And so that this requires such a subtle way of approaching the subject matter. Okay, and I know we've covered a bit, but any questions about this? Let's not hang up until there is some clarity about it.
So, Prashantji,
Huh.
you mentioned there are no paradoxes in Vedanta. Are you saying that from the point of view of the intent and the teaching? Because to a lay person who's listening to this, it just seems like ridden with all these contradictions and paradoxes, right? So,
Pujya Swamiji uses the expression seeming paradoxes. They are only seeming until you pull the right string so that the knot gets untangled. And where is that knot? Buddhi. All paradoxes are only paradoxes in one's understanding. Have you heard of the twin paradox when it comes to time travel? There's something called like the twin paradox. So it's like, you have two twins, they are the exact same age. And then, you talk about how time is relative, right? From one to the other. Now, one twin goes off on a rocket ship, and the other twin is on Earth, and that rocket ship is fast and it's accelerating, and it approaches closely the speed of light. Of course, you can't touch or exceed it, but it approaches close to the speed of light. Another twin comes back, and the one who comes back is younger than the one who stayed at home. But then you talk about it, this thing about, oh, but the time is relative. So then who is to decide one is supposed to get old and the other is supposed to get young? It's supposed to be relative, because one sees time slow down, the other sees it also slow down, and how does this work? But then that is a paradox only to the extent that somebody doesn't understand special relativity. If you understand special relativity, it's not a paradox, because what happens in that paradox, I'm just sort of deviating a little bit, but when you accelerate, you have changed your frame of reference. When you accelerate through space-time, so you're not accelerating through space, but you're accelerating through space-time as one construct. The one who accelerates is the one who went off on the rocket ship, and then he decelerates, and his frame of reference has essentially been altered forever. And so his frame of reference is changed, and therefore for that twin, time moves more. I guess he sees everything else speed up. When he returns back, everybody else is old or dead, but he's still approximately the same age. So in that case, the paradox was only a paradox which was based on a lack of understanding of relativity. Same way, if anybody perceives paradoxes in Vedanta, it is a lack of understanding of Vedanta. But Shastra is inherently paradox free. It is uh, uh, I guess internally consistent. It's consistent. Even the greatest paradox one can see seemingly is that, oh, hold on, you have the Vedas which say that karma yoga, be dedicate your actions to Ishvara, receive results as prasada, etc., etc. But then the same Veda says you're not a doer, but here you say do. And not only that, but the Vedas keep saying do, 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 do. What? Do this yajna, do that yajna, do this mantra, do that mantra. Offer this to Bhagwan, offer this hymn, this stotram, this tuti, this suktam, etc., etc. Keep offering, offering, offering. Keep doing, 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 doing. Hey, but you're not a doer. Huh? What are you talking about? Do, but you don't be a doer. What is this about? You're confusing people. The rishis were confused people. That is one way of approaching it, right? The rishis were confused. Or maybe another way of approaching it is no, no, no. The first set of people who wrote the Vedas treated you as a doer. The next set of people disagreed with the first set of people, and those were like more like relatively modern rishis. Or the third set of people who say, nee, 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 nee. It is Adi Shankaracharya who changed all the interpretation. He interpreted it a certain way. Or no, another said, no, they were influenced by Buddhism, and that's why they went to this way of renunciation. Before it was all action, and then Buddhism compelled them to move towards it. See, if I want to be, doubting Thomas, not meant to be a biblical expression, but if in this context, if I want to keep doubting, doubting, doubting the Vedas, I'll find 1,000 ways to say that the Vedas are faulty and there are paradoxes and all. Or I can eat the humble pie and I can say that what, I don't know enough. Let me go learn this well. And when I learned this well, I find there are no paradoxes. It was all here. I untangled it. I pulled the string. Shastra is this process culminates in the knowledge, and the knowledge is the self. And ultimately, you cannot attain mukti through any other form except by recognizing this vision of the self as oneself. Beautiful. It's profound. And you can't improve upon this vision. Pujya Swamiji says that also. You cannot improve upon the vision of the self. Only and this is not that, oh, this is a philosophy of the self that you cannot improve upon. It is a truth. Every other philosophy, whether it's a Western philosopher or an Indian philosopher for that matter, every philosophy is laden with problems and it's incomplete. In Vedanta alone, not only is it perfectly coherent without a single blemish, but it is also the self that is declared, that is unfolded. You cannot get larger than that. You cannot get more profound than Sachidananda. What can be greater than Sachidananda? Nothing. And that is why you are the whole and you are complete. And this wisdom that dawns, this Sarvatma Buddhi, that I am the whole, I am that which is which is the Adhisthana for the entire Jagat, without being impacted by the color of the Jagat. I am untainted by the Jagat. And I am that whole. That vision you cannot improve upon. You cannot one up it. And because you cannot one up it, because it is so complete, it is Purnam. And because it is Purnam, therefore moksha is possible. No. Moksha could not be freedom with even the tiniest blemish. If I, as the self, had even a tiny blemish in my Swarupa, then how could mukti be a possibility? Only when I am the whole, only when I am Purnam, only when I am Asangam, only when I am total, only when I am without limitations, can mukti be a possibility when I recognize that that is who I am. If I recognize myself as a flawed, insignificant character in this space opera that's playing out, how can mukti be a possibility? It can't be. So the knowledge of the self is the self. Knowledge is the self. And this knowledge is moksha. Because the self is moksha. It's like, it gives you goosebumps when you think about it. But it's not. This is not, Vedanta 101. It takes appreciation. It takes some time. You can't start with this teaching. Any questions further? I think in the last few weeks, this has been one of our more important sessions. This particular one. If anything is unclear, I do recommend revisiting it. I'll record it. Of course, I'll post it. But I would say this is really, and we've done this a couple of times. But yeah, this is one of those instances when the crux of Vedanta has been well established, and it's probably worth revisiting. Okay, so let's maybe take a pause before. I don't think we should proceed with any other subject at this point, and we'll meet next week. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Thank you, Ji.